with this call. I guess first off, just like to thank everyone for participating in this teleconference. We'll go ahead and start off with introductions. We'll start here at NRC headquarters so we could match names and voices. Again, it's Rich Guzman, a project manager in the Office of Nuclear Reactor Regulation in license.
This is Ray Hoffman in NSERC.
Kennard, NSERC. Mike Norris, I'm the team leader of the operating reactor licensing in NSERC, and acting chief.
That completes introductions here at NRC headquarters. Are there any other NRC participants on the bridge line to include the region?
John Johnson from NSERC.
Oh, you guys. Okay. How about at region? Okay. Hearing none. How about the licensee, Dominion Nuclear? You would introduce yourselves.
Yeah, Rich. This is Craig Sly. I work at the Dominion headquarters. We call it Innsbruck. It's in Richmond.
Michael Whitlock, licensing from Innsbruck.
Bill Aiken, Emergency Planning, Innsbruck. Joe Graff, Emergency Planning, Innsbruck. And John Costello, Emergency Planning, also at Innsbruck.
Great. Craig, were you expecting anyone from the actual sites?
I don't believe so.
Okay. All right. Well, hearing no other licensee participants, for the members of the public, you would please introduce yourselves.
Marvin Lewis, member of the public.
Mute off.
Sorry, can you restate that, the last person? Okay. Good afternoon. This is Rich.
Mute on.
I'd just like to remind everyone to mute their phones if they are not obviously speaking on the bridge line.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can.
This is Erica Gray calling from Richmond, Virginia. I'm with the Sierra Club Virginia chapter.
Great. Good afternoon, Erica. Okay, is there anyone else online representing the public? Okay, hearing none, we'll just go ahead and get started. Before I turn it over to Dominion, I'd like to go over a few items. First off, the purpose of this call is to discuss Dominion's planned fleet submittal, specific license amendment request regarding the proposed revision to reactor coolant system sampling methodology, which would also involve changes to the individual site's emergency action levels. There's a rough agenda. The first off, the teleconference is scheduled for 1 hour from 1 o'clock to 2 p.m. Eastern Time. As a rough overview, the licensee will be giving a presentation on the aforementioned subject with questions and comments as needed from the NRC staff. For the licensee, we do have a copy of the presentation slides that you did provide us. We appreciate it, and we'll be following it as you give your presentation. This is considered a Category 1 public meeting, which means in part that the members of the public will have an opportunity to communicate with the NRC staff. It happens after the business portion of the meeting, but before the meeting adjourns. With that, before I turn it over to the licensee, anyone here at headquarters had anything introductory remarks? Okay, Craig, I'll just hand it over to you. We've got your slides, and we're ready to listen in, and we'll chime in as needed.
Okay, Rich. You stole a lot of my thunder, so I'll just briefly maybe repeat some of what you said, and then turn it over to my technical guys here. Really, the purpose of this meeting is to let the NRC staff know that this LAR is going to be submitted probably sometime in November, and make sure that they understand what we're planning on submitting. We hope that the presentation will allow the staff the opportunity to ask questions and make any comments they think they need to make at this point, and generally ensure that we have a common understanding of what we're proposing to change and why. Hopefully this call will help us and you in our efforts to efficiently process this LAR. That's generally what pre-submittal meetings are for, and this one is really no different than others we've conducted in the past. With that, I'll turn it over to Joe Graff, and he can walk you through the technical stuff.
All right, thanks, Craig and Rich. My name is Joe Graff. I work in emergency preparedness here in Innsbruck. I'm going to start on slide number 2, which is the scopes. I think Rich pretty much covered this, but the purpose of this is to review our proposed 5090 license amendment request for changing EALs for Millstone, Surry, and North Anna, specifically for fuel-clad degradation and barrier loss thresholds that involve taking RCS samples at 1 foot distance. If you turn to slide 3, a little background. As part of our Nuclear Oversight Improvement Initiative, we undertook an effort here within EP and engineering to evaluate the way each one of our stations analyzes RCS samples for determining fuel-clad degradation and barrier loss in our EAL schemes. Our current technical basis for calculating these thresholds date back to the mid-90s for the sites, and obviously predates the purchase of Millstone by Dominion. The objective of our effort was to apply a consistent approach within the fleet for determining the detector response values when measuring a 1 milliliter RCS sample at a distance of 1 foot. We believe we've identified a better analysis approach that introduces a new methodology for determining more accurate detector response value, and that's what we want to discuss today. Just a little brief background on our current methodology. Our existing methodology for these EALs uses an approach that's based on a very simple rad protection equation used to estimate dose rate from a single energy point source. The source term was based on isotopic release fractions from new Reg 1465 using design basis release fractions in the core and did not account for decay. This existing methodology is based on sound engineering principles, has been reviewed and approved as part of our licensing basis, and yields acceptable results to be used in our fuel-clad degradation and fuel barrier loss thresholds for our EAL schemes. However, because we are trying to raise the bar here in this initiative, we've come up with a proposed methodology that will employ a consistent method across the Dominion fleets and is based on advanced computerized shielding analysis techniques for accounting for actual source geometry. And these techniques didn't exist back when the EALs were approved. The source term is consistent with the latest design basis calculation assumptions and accounts for changing source isotopic due to decay, i.e. over time. The core release fractions assumed were from new Reg 1228, twice new Reg 1465 previously, and considered the best estimate or expected, which are considered best estimate or expected rather than bounding and conservative design basis assumptions. We believe this is consistent with industry and OE recommendations that EALs should be realistic values and not bounding values based on design basis assumptions, which tend to drive thresholds to conservative values. That's a summary of what our current methodology is and what the difference in our proposed methodology. And in accordance with 10 CFR 5054 Quebec, we've determined that the proposed methodology approach identified above constitutes a deviation to our existing EAL scheme. By that I mean the EAL-based scheme is altered in meaning or intent from what has previously been reviewed and approved by the NRC. The classification of events could be different using the new methodology, and therefore, as a result, we believe the EAL changes we're proposing require NRC review and approval prior to implementing. We feel that using the proposed methodology results in more accurate EAL thresholds for determining fuel clad degradation and fuel clad barrier loss during emergency events. If you turn to page 4, please. And I don't know if the NRC folks have your station EAL flow charts or matrices handy, but if you do, that might be helpful during the next part of the discussion. But if you don't, that's not a big deal because I'm going to go over the pertinent details for the proposed changes. So if you've got the matrices, fine. If not, it's no big deal.
This is Rich Gooden. We do not have the matrices here, so.
That's fine, Rich. I'll briefly identify the applicable sections of the EAL matrices that are going to be changed and highlight the scope of the specific changes. And just to put in context on the level of change, they're roughly between 80 and 100 EALs per unit, depending on how you count some of the fission product barrier EALs. We're going to be touching 2 of them, and I'll go over the 2 we're going to be changing. The units at North Anna and Surry are similar. Therefore, we just have one set of EALs for Surry and North Anna. The units at Millstone are different. Therefore, there are 2 sets of EALs for that site's operating units. There's a set of EALs for Millstone 2, and there's a set of EALs for Millstone 3. We'll be going over the affected EALs at this point. If the specific EALs for Millstone 2 that will be changing, and again, these are the RCS samples measured at a distance of 1 foot. For Millstone 2, it's EAL Bravo Uniform 3, BU3, Fuel Clad Degradation number 2, and Fuel Clad Barrier 3, Loss number 4. These are 2 distinct EALs in the EAL scheme for Millstone 2. And they just happen to be the same EAL numbers for Millstone 3. The EAL numbers applicable for North Anna is EAL Fuel Clad Degradation Sierra Uniform 5.1, SU 5.1, and Fuel Clad Barrier Loss number 4. And the same 2 EAL numbers are also applicable to Surry. So that makes things kind of simple. With that, the general change to the EALs that we're making involve moving from a 1 threshold number value, if you will, to a table of threshold numbers that account for sample decay over time, depending on when the sample is taken. So with that, if you would turn to page 5 of the slides, you can see the proposed threshold tables that we're proposing to use in lieu of our numbers. And this is a summary of the new fuel clad degradation and fuel clad barrier tables that we propose to use. A couple obvious questions come to mind when you look at these tables. The Millstone EALs are actually based on an actual 1 milliliter sample. The North Anna and Surry EALs are based on various sample volumes as allowed by chemistry procedures for the site, and will obviously depend on the volumes of sample obtained. So that's why you'll see a delta in the units between Millstone, North Anna, and Surry. You'll notice that for the proposed EALs, the Millstone 2 and the Millstone 3 EALs are all the same, and that was by design. We wanted a consistent approach, and that's what's been engineered into this proposed scheme. The fuel clad degradation values for 3 out of the 4 sites, Millstone 2, Millstone 3, and North Anna, is actually based on 60 microcuries per gram iodine 131 DEQ, which is our tech spec value. And if you look at the tables, you'll notice that the 1 milliliter sample for all 3 of those are the same by design. The one difference is Surry, because Surry's tech specs are custom, and the fuel clad degradation value is based on 10 microcuries per gram iodine 131 DEQ, and therefore they have a different value for the fuel clad degradation. The fuel clad barrier loss values for all sites are based on 300 microcuries per gram iodine 131 DEQ, and therefore if you look at the tables, all of the 1 mil sample volume numbers are all the same for the fleet, and that again is by design. So with that, what I'd like to do is just use Millstone 2 as an example to illustrate how the EALs will be changed and subsequently employed. So I'm just going to use Bravo Uniform 3 fuel clad degradation EAL 2 Millstone 2 for illustration purposes. That EAL currently reads dose rate at 1 foot from unpressurized RCS sample greater than or equal to 2 millirem per hour per milliliter. And the proposed change will read dose rate at 1 foot from unpressurized RCS sample greater than or equal to table Bravo 1 threshold. We're going to call this table Bravo 1. So that, in essence, is the nature of the change. We'll be using the same employment of the other tables in similar manner for the barrier loss thresholds as well. So with that kind of concludes my technical review of the EALs. I did want to go over on slide 6 our submittal content and schedule. We have an internal action item to submit the LAR in November of 2015, and the LAR will include a detailed discussion section that will include a review of the site's current licensing basis, an explanation in detail of the new proposed methodology for calculating the detector response values, and a summary of the EAL and EAL technical basis document changes for all four sites. The LAR will include detailed EAL redline and clean markups for the EALs and the EAL tech basis document. So there'll be a redline version or track change version, if you will, of the current approved EALs with all the changes highlighted in red, and then we'll also provide a clean copy of what we call the final, what would be the final EAL after the changes are made. We also plan to include an EAL comparison and summary of deviations attachment, which will identify deviations from our currently approved schemes. And we will be requesting a 12-month review for the LAR. That completes my presentation. We'll be happy to handle any questions. I know I kind of talked fast. If anybody has any questions on the content or the proposed submittal.
Good afternoon. This is Ray Hoffman, and there's a couple things I do want to make sure of. I do appreciate the slides answered the majority of the questions I had, but I want to make sure that you're going to provide, looking at your current EALs and you're going to propose, and on that justification, what you provide me, I need sufficient information to make sure that I can independently evaluate your change. And I just want to make sure, I think I heard you say that you're going to give me the changed copy to your technical basis document in addition to your EALs. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And those were the main things I had. Is there anything else?
Yeah, this is Mike Norris. Are you guys coming in with a Rev 6 upgrade anytime soon?
I'm going to let management address that question.
Okay.
It has been discussed. Right now, the plan is that the Virginia sites, North End and Surry, potentially could go to Rev 6 with a submittal sometime in 2016. It would be very late in 2016 if it happens next year. As far as Millstone, the plan and strategy is they would be going to Rev 6 as far as a submittal as early as or no later than 2017.
Okay. Yeah, I was just concerned about getting a package in that could be included the type of changes into a Rev 6, and then having your Rev 6 show up 4 months later and having us do duplicate efforts.
I can say at this time there has been no actions to date on any activity to change over to Rev 6. So that alone is going to take us many months to prepare such a package. So at the earliest it would be the very late in 2016 for our Virginia plans.
Okay.
Any other questions here from NRC? Okay, nothing here. I guess at this point that would conclude the business portion of our discussion. For the members of the public, it's your opportunity for communicating with NRC staff. If you've got any comments, questions?
Hello, this is Erica calling from Virginia. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of acronyms that have been used, so I'm not real familiar with all of them. I guess my biggest concern is, it appears that maybe it's just about trying to redefine what an emergency is. So, I think that hopefully the NRC is looking at strengthening regulations, not softening them. But I'm curious because, obviously I didn't see, just like the NRC doesn't have that flow chart. Why or what are the changes? I mean, I heard them say that at 1 foot distance for the testing. Is that what it is right now for the sampling?
This is Ray Hoffman, although I don't have their plans in front of me. I did briefly review them before I did come over, and pretty much they're using the same detectors, same location. They spend a lot of more, it appears that they're spending a lot of more time and effort coming up with more accurate readings that'll take care of the actual isotopic mix at the time of the accident, as well as over time there will be some decay. So this is trying to give us a more accurate indication. Like I said, I haven't seen it, but that's my impression of what this change involves.
So in other words, thank you. So in other words, it's not going to be allowing for larger numbers to be considered an accident or more of a problem. I guess I'm at a loss for words here.
Let me answer that one real quick. This is Don Johnson. The changes proposed, obviously, Dominion can answer to those since they're not on the docket yet. But in a nutshell, the changes they're proposing is 2 specific instances out of about 100 that are all in and amongst themselves as schemes considered extremely redundant and diverse. And actually, these samples are considered a confirmation of a release to the public that is actually captured in one of the other 100 or so thresholds. Because the sampling takes time, and we do not want an emergency declaration to necessarily take that amount of time. But the sampling strategies are primarily confirmation of a release that had already been identified in other EALs and appropriately classified so the public's protected. So when we get this package as an LER, what we have to do is make sure that there is no unreasonable
increase in this confirmation timing. And if it is merely just to clarify or change the set point calculation strategy, which happens over time as instrumentation is replaced that's more accurate, we're going to make sure that the scheme as a whole isn't violated and that the public is actually protected. So the idea that this is actually going to delay a classification, that's not going to happen because all the other stuff happens well before the sampling strategies. And that SU 5.1 that they talked about is actually an unusual event, which is our first classification level. The fission barrier thresholds or criteria that they discussed goes actually into a logic progression from an alert to a general emergency, depending on which barriers are lost or potentially lost. But again, in this particular instance, it's a confirmation sample methodology that they're apparently trying to improve upon, and it has to be submitted for public comment, or submitted to the NRC for review, which includes a public comment period, and then and we'll evaluate it for our reasonable assurance.
Okay, so in other words, is this like the first time the NRC has gotten a request for a license amendment for this in a particular regulation?
No, not at all. It actually happens quite often. There's a number of them in hand right now, different EALs, some in overall schemes, some individual EALs, but it happens often. And every one of them gets processed in accordance with 10 CFR 5090, which primarily we addressed since our rulemaking of a few years ago to ensure a public comment period to make sure all stakeholders have an opportunity to review and chime in if they so desire.
Okay, and I just have one last question. Towards the end of the meeting, this, I don't know if it's Rev or Reg 6 was mentioned a couple of times. Could you please tell me what that is?
Yeah, that's we endorse several NEI, Nuclear Energy Institute, and driven documents related to the development of emergency action level schemes. And our present latest endorsed version that incorporates lessons learned and things like the Fukushima incident and things of that nature is NEI 9901 Revision 6. So when Mike asked if they're going to Revision 6, an upgrade requires submission of a license amendment and public comment period, but also it's the overall scheme which would capture these three EALs or three thresholds that they're talking about. And the reason Mike brought it up is we did not want to duplicate efforts if we're going to review three that they're planning on coming in relatively soon for a scheme change. We would rather capture it all in to make a more efficient use of everybody's resources.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. Hello, can I be heard?
Yes. Can you state your name? Just
Yes, my name is Priscilla Starr. I live in New York. I live in East Hampton, New York, downwind of Millstone. And I am aware not too long ago, within the last 2 weeks, there was an incident at Millstone Unit 2 associated with a leaking relief valve. And I'm on this call to learn relevant to what you're discussing to this leaking relief valve, and what, if anything, will make that kind of leaking relief valve situation, which was classified as a low-level emergency, not occur again. Did you understand my question?
yeah, we understood the question, and you said it's Priscilla Starr. This is Rich.
That's correct. Am I talking loud enough?
Yeah. You're talking. I can hear you.
Like I said, I'm here to learn, listen and learn, but quite concerned that was still considered an emergency. So, and I did notice some spiking all along the eastern seaboard, above and below Millstone, until somewhere around Surry, it it was a little lower, a couple days after this incident. So that's a concern of mine, being downwind of the plant. I'm not a Connecticut resident, as I told you, but that's why I'm on this call. I want to see what's relevant to this discussion that you're having about technical stuff, which is hard for a lay person to understand. How does this relate to these kind of emergencies at Millstone?
Ms. Norh, this is Rich Guzman. Unfortunately, we do not have our the region on the phone call. That would be the part of the NRC. That would be we have resident inspectors at the site. Obviously, inspect the day-to-day performance of the site. However, if I gave you my contact information, or if you gave me your contact information, I can follow up on that question. But I do understand what you're asking. You're